A bit ago, there was a Fnaf anniversary image that depicted all of the main and side characters of Fnaf. We've got the main characters, William, and Vanny, the side characters like Freddy, the faceless night guard, Foxy, the glam rocks. There's even a cute cameo from Innard hidden right in the back. But, somebody's missing. Somebody important to the Fnaf lore. I haven't been the only one who noticed that the puppet sort of got dropped by Fnaf. Like, not just no longer relevant to the games, but never having any sort of presence in the books either. This character, who was originally established as a staple to the casts, sort of lost all importance. And I don't just mean through who is possessing them, but their entire model. We see different variations of other characters return time and time again, and we've seen characters who haven't even been featured in a game recently receiving new merch. But the puppet never even received an action figure, was not featured in Fnaf AR at all, even though all of the toy animatronics were, and had only 2 short glimpses of it in all of the Fazbear Frights and the Tales of the Pizzaplex stories. I cannot stress enough how important the puppet was to the story of Fnaf. He's not just a broken Bonnie or a scantily clad Chica. This is not just a throwaway one-off animatronic. This is the one who brought the others to life, the one who guided them, the one who was involved in both William's first and second burning, the driving force for the person who almost killed William the last time, a character with great importance who appeared in numerous games and now has sort of flown off the radar. But let's be fair, I'm sure the puppet would still be a relevant character if it was an Afton. It seemed like every main character had to be sidelined for William himself. And I know what you're about to say. It's because the puppet burned in the fire. Its story is over. I would argue that isn't the case when you look at Circus Baby, who has been in more books and merch since the fire than before the fire, and gets more merchandise even now, and arguably survives through Vanessa, who, while being a different character, shares a lot of the same story beats. And that's not even bringing up William. Michael's even going to be the main character of the movie, and which, understandably, makes me extremely nervous. Maybe Henry hasn't been relevant since, but he wasn't really a character until the books, so it would make sense that he pretty much dies off right after they end. But the puppet was a consistent character who pretty much disappeared. There hasn't even been the variations of him, like with Eleanor to Baby. Eleanor isn't Baby, we established that in my last video, but they have the same gimmick, well, some of the same gimmick, and a similar design, so they're practically the same character. You could have easily had Eleanor be a puppet and got similar results. Speaking of which, let's discuss the abysmal depiction of the puppet in the books. The only story that the puppet headlines in is You're the Band, which is the last Fazbear Fright story before it swapped over to Tales of the Pizzaplex. Considered a cut story that was then re-released in the last book, which I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but I digress. You're the Band is about a mother who is trying to throw a birthday party for her son, ends up getting some official and original Fnaf merch, such as a Freddy head mask, and the boy ends up being possessed by it. She ends up returning to the pizzeria and runs into the animatronics there. Mike appears. This is, in fact, if I recall, the only Mike appearance of Mike. Like, there's hints of Michaels all over the Fazbear Frights books, but this is the only, hi, my name is Mike, and I have a connection with Freddy Fazbear's. The puppet appears for a bit in the story and seems to be protecting the band, and once they get everything straightened out, it leaves. You're the Band is a very strange story, because You're the Band is pretty much the most FNAF story, if that makes any sense. It plays it a little safe, but through that, it comes off feeling exceedingly canon, if that makes any sense. While some of the other stories might have things in them that like, oh, this would never happen in the game. This story feels very much like it would happen in the game, or that it could happen in the movie, or such like that. It fits the brand. So that's something. And in that regard, I think the fact that the puppet's only main appearance in the Fazbear Frights book is in this story is kind of for its benefit. But then when you compare it with characters like Ballora, who headline in 2 stories, she headlines in 2, and I think she appears in 5, unless I'm counting one twice. So she has a ton of appearances. There are a few characters like that who repeatedly crop up. The other appearance of the puppet in the epilogues. Okay, if you've watched my Eleanor video, you know what I'm going to talk about here. Something happened with the epilogues. They were going into a storyline and then suddenly kind of shifted course at the last section. They built up for William Afton to return. He returns as an amalgam, and in a single epilogue, he's defeated. There's 2 characters we're following, Jake and Andrew. Andrew gets written out of the story, never comes back. And Eleanor takes over as the main villain. But one of the other things that happens is the appearance of the puppet. So this detective, Larson, is investigating the Stitch Wraith and all of this. He ends up finding this bag, which I can only assume is a grocery bag, with something peculiar in it. It's revealed later on that this is the puppet, and he's been carrying the puppet around with him. When the amalgam rabbit appears, the puppet suddenly speaks, and it's like, release me from the bag and let me go to him. Or it says something else, but he opens the bag, and it flies at the amalgam and destroys it. And then it's gone. You can see what I don't like about this. It feels like one of those joke cameos that you might see in The Simpsons, where they lampshade, the old Simpsons, where they lampshade a much beloved character coming back, and then he comes back for 2 seconds and then he's gone. That's kind of what's going on here. Now, the puppet does not appear in the Silver Eyes trilogy. And before you say, well, there's Charlie, not actually. The Charlie in the book is not the real Charlie. And even then, she's leagues aside from the puppet itself. That would be like if you wanted to see one of your favorite superheroes return, and someone said, well, they are a background character in that high school AU superhero TV show, or they don't have any powers and act like a typical high schooler. It doesn't really work. It doesn't scratch the same itch. The puppet had a few cameo appearances in Security Breach, and by a few, I mean 3 that I can count off of my fingers. It appeared on an arcade machine, as did almost every single other Fnaf character, so that doesn't count. It had a plush toy appear in one specific location. For its credit, it is a location you have to visit. It's that bathroom in the arcade that you have to go through to flip the switch to turn off DJ Music Man, or you get my gist. And it appeared as being connected to the Blob. Now, the Blob, I gotta point something out, because this isn't official. This is just something I'm saying because I've heard people say this. I've heard people say that the Blob is not supposed to be Molten Freddy, but is actually a culmination of, well, I've heard some people say it's a culmination of parts taken from the museum, which, yeah, that can be possible. It's never confirmed or denied. I've heard some people say that it's actually a culmination of the animatronics that were released during FNAF AR. To which I say, that is a clever idea, but the puppet was not in FNAF AR. I mean, I digress. Honestly, I think I mentioned this on another video, but what I think the Blob is unfinished. I think it was supposed to look like something else, and I think this was kind of like a time constraint thing. I've heard rumors as well that the daycare attendant was a reworked puppet, and while I do see the similarities, I don't think that this was the case. I've seen concept art that kind of shows that they were always just their own thing. If there were stages in the concept art where they showed, like, first a puppet, and then one that looked more like a puppet but sun, and then puppet but moon, then maybe I could buy it. But in this case, it kind of just looks like They have similarities but are their own thing. I think the daycare attendant was kind of like a culmination of the best aspects that people liked from different animatronics. That's why it has the Funtime Freddy voice. That's why it has clownish and circus-ish and a puppetish appearance. That's why it has the behavior it has. I think that it was just sort of like an amalgam of concepts that they knew people would like. Okay, so I've actually noticed this situation for a while, and I've actually had a couple of people comment on it too, but it was just today that I decided to finally talk on it because, lo and behold, we are getting the first piece of unique puppet merch that we've gotten in ages. It's this statue of Lefty and the puppet coiled up together in a loving embrace. Well, kind of. One of these days, I'm going to do a video on Henry, and I'm going to let loose about how I feel about the concept of Lefty. And I don't mean like in a bad way. So, we're getting this statue, along with the statue of Foxy, we're getting this statue seemingly out of nowhere. Does this mean, is this statue because we're about to get something puppet related in the games, or in a book, or the movie? The cynic in me says no, that this is just a statue, and it probably is just a statue. The extreme cynic in me says yes, because there's no way they'd do something puppet related elsewise. But I think it's a neat statue. Something seems a little familiar about it, but I'm sure that's just the similarities in fan art I've seen. But it's cool. I'm willing to buy it since I like the puppet and I like puppet merch, as long as it's not like crazy expensive. And while I'm like that we're getting this, I can't help but think about how empty the prize corner in Security Breach was, and how it might have been a little less barren with like a patrolling puppet enemy that followed on your heels or tailed you on strings. How cool, how creepy would that might have been, and how it'll never be.